Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Kiz from Hip Hop Heals. Welcome to everybody who's joined us. We're going to do a quick check-in, introduce our guest, and then we will have a quick break. We might have a couple of people join us as we start this entry into the session, and 7:30 and 8:30, there'll be a quick break for comfort, get a cup of tea, screen break. We're going to be interactive and we want you to relax and take part as much as you feel. So there were some guidelines on the email that we communicated, and that's really about being respect, taking care. So if you think about the acronym CARE, we'd hope that everybody was considerate, paying attention, showing respect and showing empathy. And I'd urge you to make sure that if you were to offer any information or share anything today, just remember we're in a webinar that's going to be on YouTube, recorded and filmed, and it would probably be a good idea to just share out of 10, if 10 was a bereavement and the details of that, just to share at level 2. So if 1 was like what you had for breakfast. So level 2 or 3 on anything that we're sharing, please, just to keep everybody safe, keep you safe. And if you were to need any further support with anything, if anything comes up as a part of the session, we do have trained staff on hand to support you. If you needed to have a breather, you wanted a supported break, you could speak to one of us in a breakout room. We're going to have a look in the chat now. Anybody who's just arrived, we are recording. If you want to stay off the recording, which goes onto YouTube, please do leave your camera off, but please, if you're feeling able, do interact on camera so we can see and communicate and make eye contact. Now you'll see in the chat I've deposited a Google Doc. This is a toolkit for the day. While we're recording for the YouTube, I'll also be in the chat typing up links to books that you might say. You're the people with the knowledge, experience, education, skills that we want to harness from the community so that we can shape creative health programs and interventions for people who are considered to be the global majority. So Black and brown people and people who are non-white are the majority on the planet. So when we use the word ethnic minority, it might be true in a white majority country, but not globally. So it's part of making an equitable shift to representation and language that is reflecting the nature of the world. So for today, when I talk about global majority people, I might also use the balance of white majority people. We won't be talking about Black, Asian and minority ethnic people, which is the term BAME that we use in the UK. You might use something different where you're from, but we'll be talking about global majority people because our funders, the Bearing Foundation, who kindly supported us to set this research program up with Birmingham Centre for Arts Therapies in partnership, they've done a report and highlighted that lots of charities, organisations in the arts, mental health groups who use the arts, participatory community arts organisations are run in the UK by white middle class people. But the greatest need and the most inequality around mental health is for global majority people, in particular Black people. There's all sorts of different nuances in that. So we will consider activities today for global majority people and think about how we can support more employment in this field and what we can do to support engagement in that field. All right then, without further ado, our guest today is Dr. Alexander Crooke. When I was studying my own course into therapeutic writing, my MSc, I read some of his work, and basically you're very lucky because he's one of the superstars of hip hop therapy and therapeutic practice around hip hop. And I'm going to ask Alex if you could please come on and tell us a little bit about yourself. So you pioneered hip hop therapy in the Southern Hemisphere. How did you get started? And welcome to Miles.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And hello, everybody. Wonderful to be here with you. I want to start this morning by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung people of the East Kulin Nation. And I want to start by acknowledging that these lands were never ceded. The sovereignty was never ceded for these lands, I'm sorry. And that these lands continue to be held illegally. And I want to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of these lands for maintaining culture and connection to land throughout the last 200 plus years of colonisation. And pay respects to, elders past, present and emerging. So I'm speaking to you. These lands are otherwise known as Melbourne, Australia. So that's where I'm based at the moment. So thank you very much for that introduction. So how do
Alex,
I get...
Before you get started, please could you put your video on? I can't see it. There you go. Amazing. Thank you so much. Got ya.
No worries. Okay. Okay. So how did I get into working with hip hop in a therapeutic sense? So I originally started out working in adolescent mental health at a children's hospital, working in research there, and doing a lot of work sort of, I guess, on population health for that age group, and also working on a few, I guess, more targeted research projects towards adolescent mental health. And one of the things that really struck me more generally about that space was that there wasn't a lot of creativity in the space. So there wasn't a sort of much music or art or that kind of stuff. And where it was there, it seemed to be quite limited in terms of what was on offer. So from there, I actually went and fronted up to the music therapy department here at Melbourne, and asked if I could come and do a course and become a music therapist, because I thought, I had always really gotten a lot from music as a young person myself, and it was very helpful for me. And I was very aware of all the really empowering messages in the music that I was listening to and all this sort of stuff. And so I felt like that there was a lot there, and I wanted to go and sort of be able to really, I guess, harness some of that in kind of the work that I wanted to do going forward. So I went to the music therapy department and said, can I sign up and do a degree and become a music therapist? And at that stage, they said, what are your musical instrument skills like? How are you on a piano and a guitar and that sort of stuff? And I said, I'm absolutely horrible on a piano, can't play piano at all. I used to play guitar years ago, but I can play a turntable or two turntables really well. I can play, with a mixer, and I can play a drum machine, and I can play a synthesizer and a computer and all these other things. And, I've been DJing and producing for years. And essentially they were like, that's not good enough. You're going to have to do an extra course alongside the course to learn piano and guitar and all that sort of stuff, and we don't recommend you do it. So essentially, I didn't do it. I went away, did some more research on other stuff, and then came back later and said, can I do a PhD? And kind of came in the back door through research. And started doing work in schools with young people, and again, found the same thing. And this was with music. Found the same thing, that although these people were using music, the music that was being used seemed to be of a very specific kind. And so it was either, I guess, traditionally white music, or it was pop music, but very, very pop. And I know that, like, I guess the reaction that I had when I was sort of hearing this music and hearing the music that the music therapists were using, was kind of like, this is cool, but I know if I was a young person and someone brought this music to me to try to work with me, I'd be walking out the room, because this is not the kind of music that resonates with me or means anything to me. So yeah, I found that really curious, I thought. Especially because a lot of the music therapy that I was doing was around adolescents, so working with young people. And not to say that there wasn't amazing work being done in that space, but there seemed to me this kind of mismatch between the kind of music that I knew that young people were listening to, and even myself. Like, I don't consider myself a young person, but if I want to be listening to drum and bass, hip hop, techno, dubstep. If you bring me into a music therapy session, that's what I want to be working with. And so I kind of thought, well, it seems that not only a music therapist not really working with this kind of music, but then if you look within the music therapy discipline more generally, and because I started getting in there and sort of being involved with some of the teaching and that kind of stuff, and there were there was nothing in the training course about anything that wasn't piano or guitar or voice based. Nothing about any kind of contemporary music genres except for some stuff on rock, and nothing on electronic music instruments or anything like that. And so not only was there sort of no discourse, there was no resources for anyone to use this kind of stuff. And then so speaking to some of my colleagues and asking them if they were using this sort of stuff, they were saying, well, we'd love to use it. And we've got lots of young people who want to be using synthesizers and making this music and that music, or, working with these kinds of artists, but I've got no idea where to start. I've got no idea about this kind of music. I don't know any of the technology, any of the instruments. I'd love it if you put something on to kind of help. So I guess that was kind of like my first iteration of doing this kind of stuff. I got a whole bunch of people that I knew who were doing work in the community, as well as people who were doing work elsewhere around the world with hip hop. And I put on a 2-day. Well, first of all, it was a public lecture with a very well known hip hop artist here in Australia, a guy by the name of Optimus from Perth, and who's been working with hip hop in youth detention and as well as Indigenous communities and a whole bunch of stuff for quite a while. As well as a guy called Dr. Elliot Gann, who I'm not sure if you've had on the show. Yeah. So and they did a bit of a chat about using hip hop in community as well as educational and therapeutic spaces. And we had people, this was a 2-hour lecture or something like that that I put on. And yeah, I had people flying up from Tasmania, which is probably the same as someone flying over from Ireland or something for you, or flying over for the mainland Europe. And then people, coming from other states of Australia and all this stuff, because there was just nothing available in the country for anyone who was sort of wanting to do this work. Yeah, so interestingly enough, didn't get that many music therapy people, but yeah, got a lot of other interesting people coming to that space. And I guess, so since then I've sort of been trying to, do research, but also I ended up building a bit of a course that went into that music therapy program to sort of teach people about music, all of the music styles that I was listening to and resonating with. And was also representative of a lot of the populations that anyone was working with if they were going into schools. So a lot of stuff around hip hop, drum and bass, techno, dubstep, all that kind of stuff, like breaking down the different music cultures, but also being very clear about the social and historical context of these music genres. So teaching people about the history of hip hop, teaching people about the history of these other kind of music genres or music cultures. I like to think of them as, and yeah, so I guess since then I've just kind of been trying to do stuff in this space. Some of it's research, some of it's advocacy, some of it's teaching, some of it's developing techniques, improvisation techniques for music therapy practice, using music technology and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't know, did I answer your question, or maybe I just kind of went off on tangents? It's something I tend to do.
No, it's brilliant to hear, really interesting, really good to get an overview of your work. So we're going to head into a break now. Before we do, I'd like you to just think about one thing that you wish you knew when you started out that could help others who were starting out. So while we have a break for the next 5 minutes, when we come back with a cup of tea and a fresh waggly tail and perked up ears, if you could start off telling us about what you wish you knew when you started that might help other people in the Zoom room to get kicked off, and then we'll go into your model, your approach, practical activities, And just to remind everybody that we do a person-centered model, and it's the same when we're training professionals. So Hip Hop Heals, my company, the social enterprise that I run and founded, we look at bridging the gap between music therapy and hip hop. And we do that through training and programs. So you are the font of knowledge. You are experts in your own field. We want to harness that from everybody in the room. We're all equal. We're all co-producers of this webinar. So please do, interact on the chat. And at the end of each segment, we'll have space to reflect. So we'll come back at 7:41. So for Alex, that'll be 6:41 a.m. So we've got Alexander Crooke with us, a music therapy researcher, an all-round top inspiration for us tonight. So the last question we asked Alex was, if you went back in time and you were starting out again, what is it that you would wish to know and pass on to others now starting out, using music therapeutically, using hip hop, working with people who were global majority, and so on and so forth?
I guess the thing that I wish that someone had told me when I was starting out, I guess in the academic sense, I guess if you're going to go into the academic space, to think about that there's pros and cons of being someone who is a multidisciplinary person. So the thing that I guess the path that I've taken throughout my career, I guess, or throughout my my practice in my life, is that I've kind of taken little bits from different places, and I've sort of done different degrees in different disciplines and sort of bridged a lot of stuff. Now that's incredibly interesting work. But it's kind of hard to get work because you don't necessarily sit in any particular place. So it's hard to get sustainable work because you don't kind of belong to anyone, if that makes sense. If you want to have an academic career, kind of picking I don't want to say pick a lane, and I'm not trying to encourage you all to like stay in boxes and stuff like that, but having a very clear trajectory and how that aligns with a specific discipline. If you're going to be doing some kind of academic thing, then yes, I wish someone had told me that, because they don't in academia here in Australia. Actually, they kind of tell you the opposite. Everyone is saying that multi or interdisciplinarity is the new thing, and that we're not meant to be working in silos anymore. And they're really, encouraging people to work across stuff. But in practice, it's makes employment difficult. So
I hear you on that. I've had something similar. I've spent 20 years working in education, community participatory arts, now in the therapeutic world and the health world. Everything's like an add-on. It's like getting a new app, but integrating the app in the overall operating system it's not like when you get like a little Chrome add-on for like Grammarly and it just integrates with everything that you're doing. I've got people thinking on one term, people I'm working with thinking another term, and one person saying, oh, that's really great, but I'm not sure about the research side. I don't research. Oh, that's really great, but I don't do the education side. I'm not an educationalist. Or that's really great, but I'm not a therapist. So I've got no idea about mental health. But the thing is, you don't really need to know everything about everything. I think we followed curiosities and inspirational avenues for us, and that's where we are. And I think that puts us in a unique position, you and I, in that we've got a global view of what we're doing. Not everybody needs to do that. So yes, you can dip in wherever you're at. And we're going to move on now. Thanks so much. We're going to move on to your approach. So could you give us, you've already started giving us a little overview of your approach. I want to think about what led you to the model and why, first of all. And I'm going to eat a chocolate bar because it's 7:45 and I think I've traveled 3 hours today. So I'm going to eat this.
Why not? Absolutely. They say eating, chocolate's a bit like giving yourself a hug, right? So,
Look, self-care, mate.
Absolutely, very important, very important. So I think that just quickly, I think the other thing that I wish someone that had told me when I was sort of starting out is to, and this is going to sound really cheesy, but you know, follow your intuition. Don't get pulled off by all of the exciting things that people kind of like dangle in front of you along the way. Because it's very easy to do that, and it's very easy to kind of say yes to a million different things. But yeah, being able to stay focused on what it is that really speaks to you, and being able to kind of sit in that kind of space of, like, I guess, your own integrity when you're thinking about what you're giving your energy to on a daily basis. I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as well. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
in terms of my approach, yeah, I guess one of the things about being interdisciplinary is that I don't necessarily have one particular approach. I do lots of sort of different things. So I guess my practice is I'm an academic where I guess I've found myself throughout this process where I realized that there was seemed to be a bit of a lack of different styles of music and styles of music making as well, and discourse around different music cultures. I guess I found that there was, you know, something a little bit lacking, discourse lacking in that. So I found myself in a position where I was like, okay, I have access to resources in academia. I have access to academic spaces, and I have some privilege as a straight white man working in academia. And so, you know, how can I think about using this privilege and these access to these spaces and stuff like that to, I guess, start creating a little bit of dialogue and discourse around some of the things that I was thought was important, or that I was feeling like was missing in the space. So yeah, I guess one of the first things I did with that was doing that, I guess, public lecture, and, you know, getting some people in the university to kind of come together in a place, and getting people from the community as well to come together in one place and sort of start talking about this sort of stuff. And that was really, at that point, was just really getting people's heads around the idea that hip hop was not something that could only be seen as a negative impact or you know, force in our society, if you will. So really just kind of, and so I guess a lot of the stuff that I do and have done over the last few years is around advocacy, and really educating people, or trying to educate people around, you know, what is hip hop? How can we think about it? How can we, you know, where did it come from? You know, what is the history of it? What are the social and cultural roots of it? And yeah, why did it come about? And also, what does it mean for a white person to be, you know, in these academic spaces having these conversations? Yeah, I guess from that, I then started, I had a lot of people come up to me after the first public lecture and sort of say, and this was both people within, I guess, practice spaces, but also people within in the community. I had one of Melbourne's top hip hop DJs. She came to me. She came to that thing. Came up to me after the lecture and said, you know, can you put on a short course, because there's, you know, I'd love to learn more about this, but there's nothing available. So it'd be really great if you did something, you know, on this. So that got me thinking. Talk to more people about it. And then that led to putting on a 2-day short course where I had people, you know, I had experts, if you will, from the States, sort of zooming in. Also, I had experts from the States actually in person. But I guess the other thing that I became really aware of as well was that while a lot of the discourse that I was learning about was coming from both the US and the UK in terms of how hip hop can be really valuable in therapeutic and community spaces, I was also really aware that there was a lot of work already happening in the community here in Australia, and especially in Melbourne. And, you know, we do have a and establish hip hop culture. And, you know, we have a history of hip hop here in Melbourne. And, you know, that history does speak to a lot of the things that hip hop has spoken to in different spaces. You know, it's been used by a lot of young people of color and young First Nations people to talk about their experiences, celebrate their identity, and all this sort of stuff. So I was aware that this was happening in our backyard, or in my backyard, if you will. So I wanted to really think about, you know, what it meant for, my position and what I could do to kind of bring the community into that space as well. So I brought a bunch of people from the community to come in and had them teaching. And these were people who weren't necessarily teachers in the academics sense, you know, so I didn't necessarily have any degrees or anything like that. But I knew were very skilled and, you know, had a lot of experience and were, you know, well regarded in the hip hop community, had a lot of experience running workshops, that kind of stuff. So I brought them in and paid them as facilitators. And for some of them, that was some of their first times coming into an academic space or into a university space after, you know, going in and trying to do a degree and having such a horrible experience that they never wanted to come back to a university again. So, you know, trying to sort of build this, this bridge, I guess, between what I realized was this stuff that was happening in the community here in Australia, and this massive gulf between the conversations that were being had in university spaces. So while at the same time trying to bring some of the knowledge and understanding of hip hop and how it could be used you know, in therapeutic, educational and community spaces, trying to bring some of that knowledge to the practitioners who are doing the work in that spaces as well, so that they could be better equipped to connect with young people and do better work in those spaces as well. So
thank you so much. We're going to start in a moment. We're going to start our creative activity. So I think if we just look into one more thing now, I want to talk about impact.
Mm-hmm.
I want to mention the Cumin network. So people who do music education, DJing, rapping, workshops around popular music are often artists, might not be involved in research, might not have academic degrees. People might have gone straight from school to college, do a youth work qualification and go straight to youth interventions. So they might not have been exposed to evaluations or evaluative processes or impact measurements and things like academic articles around research that do studies. So Cumin Network are a partnership between York University, Cambridge University. They collect and advocate for skills in evaluation and impact, so that the work that people like us in the room can be measured, and not measured for measurement's sake, but to help build a body of evidence to show that it works, to spread for other people. So we can work out, you know, if you drink lemon water when you've got a cold, or have, like, I don't know, a McDonald's over 6 weeks or whatever, you know, people will realize where the impact is going to be and choose one or the other. So if we apply that to music and hip hop, we'll have more chance of good work happening. So what is it in your work that you might be able to offer for other people to not measure for the sake of measurement, but, you know, how would we, if we've not been to uni, how would we think about what works to help people?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So yeah, I think evaluation and that kind of stuff can be incredibly useful for just getting an understanding, of how a program that you might be running is basically landing with people. I think that's a really good place to kind of start. And that can be as easy as, you know, having a bit of a check-in with people. You know, there's a couple of ways to do it. You can do it in a by sort of handing out a survey at the end of a program. And, you know, if you're going to do that, I would very much suggest that you do make the survey as easy to fill out as possible. with at least writing and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, they can be really valuable ways to kind of get some data, which you can then kind of, you know, play with and make graphs out of and all that kind of stuff. That stuff is actually incredibly valuable for funders. So, you know, if you're having to prove the viability or the benefits of any kind of program that you might be running to any kind of funding body, you know, collecting that kind of data is valuable. But if it's just for your own practice, I would also really encourage creating opportunities for dialogue and discussion sort of at the end of your programs, as long as, you may need to do a little bit of work. If you're running a group, you may need to do a little bit of work just to kind of get everyone in a space where they feel like they can share honestly and openly about how they felt about, you know, the group and the process and everything that went on. But, you know, being able to open up that space where everyone can have a very open and honest, you know, conversation about how it was for them can be really useful. Or even grabbing people individually and having a quick chat afterwards and saying, you know, how have you found it? That sort of thing as well.
Thank you so much for that quick overview. So just to recap them, there's different things you can do. There's a standard survey, keep it short and simple. One of the things I do, I'll use my prop as a sweet wrapper. Other sweets are available. So you can draw a line. A line is also known as a continuum. So you can just put a smiley face on this side, sad face on that side, and literally ask everybody to come up. You could do this with this piece of string that you blue tack or sellotape on the wall with the permission of the people who've owned the property, in case of the, you know, blue tack stains. You can just literally get people to point on the continuum and say, this side is you've had a, you know, bad day and you're feeling terrible. This side is like you've had an amazing experience. You feel like you're floating on clouds or whatever, which hopefully people would do. And equally, if you turn it this way, I do an activity which is called a mood thermometer. So you put 0 at the bottom, and if you want to color it in with like a red bit of liquid and have like a bobble at the top, like a circle, you know, and do the same thing. Terrible day, worst day ever, 10 is the top. So you don't have to do a survey in words. You could do it with post-its on an imaginary continuum. You also said about taking individuals to one side. So another thing that you could do to create more honesty is to get people to do selfie videos and to just send them to you with your, you know, privacy statements and, you know, data protection in place. And then you also said about making it safe for people in a group. I've just put a link to Mentimeter, which is an engagement tool. You have a QR code, you have preset questions, you have like a web link, a conference or a workshop. You can put the link up with all the QR code, and every participant scans or enters a code. Then they go on to the questions, and whatever it says on the screen on your presenter mode, they can see on their mobile. So if it says, what did you eat for breakfast today? You can just put chips, fried eggs, whatever, and then it'll come up on the main presentation screen. So that's another great tool for evaluation that I've seen used.
Just quickly on the first one, on the continuum, another really good continuum to use, or another good question to use, is how did you feel before the session? How do you feel after it? Super simple, but works really well with young kids and that kind of stuff. But actually really good indication of how the program is helping someone feel, because if they're consistently saying that they feel a lot better after, if they're coming in and saying they feel low at the start and good at the end, that gives you a really good indication that the program is, you know, helping them regulate or whatever it might be. So
yeah, and so we won't talk too much further on this, but just to highlight as well, one of the nuances with creative health work around mental health is that you might evoke memories. You might unconsciously or unintentionally trigger something in people. Now, if you are looking at something with people who are distressed, you might be doing something on breakfast terminology and making a song out of breakfast terminology. But they might have had a really amazing breakfast with somebody they love that they are reminded of when they eat that food that has passed away. It could be a recipe from a grandma or something like that, or, you know, a certain brand of cereal. You can't plan for every safeguarding eventuality, and you don't know where people have come from or what they do. If somebody feels bad in your session or as a result of your session, it's not a reflection that your session was bad, wrong, upsetting, and so on. We are complex beings. So you can't just go, I've done an activity, I was feeling this way, and I felt like that after. It's not like that. You might dip up and down, up and down. So, for example, I did a workshop with people around race. We're talking about enslavement of African people. It was distressing. It's natural for people to feel upset about that. So having the wellbeing score go down was not a reflection on the facilitation, but of the topic and the state of mind that was evoked by the topic. So moving towards creative activities now, we're going to have a go, and I'm going to ask you to talk us through one thing that people could take away and put in their work tomorrow.
Yep. All right. So, so we're going to talk about playlists today. But we're going to talk about a very special type of playlist. So there is something called the ISO principle, which is a principle which was developed by a music therapist back in, I want to say the 60s, maybe something like that. The idea of the ISO principle is essentially that if you are having a very bad day and you get home and you've had a row with someone on public transport or whatever it might be, and you are just absolutely raging, and you get home and you put on that song, which is, some people call it their rage anthem. And, it contains all of the anger that you're feeling and all of the things that you're, that when you can put that song on, that's a really good way of kind of meeting and witnessing and validating that rage that you might be feeling. Now, the reason why I say that's really important, let me go back a bit. So the other reason why I want to talk about playlists as well is that you may have noticed the proliferation of playlists on things like Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, Deezer, all of these different platforms. So these, and even YouTube have these different mixes. So it might be like a chill mix or like a sporty mix or something like that. So there's this idea that there are these different playlists that you can use for different moods and different times of the day. And so, if you want to chill out, then you would go and, press play on one of their chill out playlists, and you would, the idea is that automatically you're in a world of chill. So this is all a very lovely idea, and that can work sometimes, but the research and I guess the science, if you will, behind it suggests that it's actually not always the best way to go about it. And this is because this idea of the ISO principle. So the idea is that let's say you're in that rage state, you come back, you come back from a really tough day, you're really angry, really dysregulated, and instead of putting on that rage anthem, you get into your house, and whoever you share the house with says, no, I'm really chilled out. Let's put on a really chill. You look like you need to chill out. I'm going to put on some music for you, and they put on some beautiful, harps and all this sort of stuff. It's very, celestial, and it's not meeting you at all. And sometimes can actually make you more frustrated because you're like, no, I'm not feeling like that. That's not meeting me. That's not how I feel. And actually it's grating against how I'm actually feeling. And it's making me more angry because it's not, it's disvalidating the state that I'm in at the moment. So this is why having that rage anthem that you can put on and kind of go like, yes, that's me. That validates how I feel. That meets me. It witnesses me. I feel seen. All of that kind of stuff. So that's really beautiful, as long as you've got the space and stuff to do that, and scream, yell, sing, all that kind of stuff is really good for you. But you don't want to stay in that space. Now, there's been some more recent research done by Professor Katrina McFerrin here at Melbourne Uni around the healthy and unhealthy uses of music. So this is the idea that music can be really healthy for us, but it can also be unhealthy. And we need to be aware of how it can be unhealthy just as much as we need to be aware of how it can be healthy. Now, some of the ways that it can be unhealthy is that if we put on that rage anthem and we keep listening to it over and over and over again, right? That can lead to what we call rumination or intensification, and we stay in that spot or we intensify that emotion. So what we actually want to do is try to move out of that state. And we actually want to move, we want to try to regulate our emotion and change our emotional state into something that's different. So to do that, what we need to do is we first need to meet it with the rage anthem, right? And then we need to find another song. The other thing that we need to understand as well is that we all have our own associations with music. So what is a rage anthem for me might not be a rage anthem for you, and probably won't be a rage anthem for someone else. Now, the reason is that we all have our own associations with music. So what a piece of music means to us in terms of like what memories we associate with it, what relationships we associate with it, all of these different things impact how we feel from a certain song. So it's not just, you know, the chords, it's not just the tempo, it's not just the volume, it's actually all our own associations. So your playlist is going to be different from someone else's. This is another reason why these Spotify ones are, you know, don't always work the way we would like them to. So after we do our rage anthem, then we want to think about a song that is also kind of ragey, but a little bit less so, right? Just a little bit less. And then, you know, so then we put that on our playlist. And then the next one, let's think about doing 10 songs, right? And then the next one is a little bit less ragey, but then also starts to bring in something that, you know, another kind of emotion, you know, it might be a sense of empowerment, or it might be a sense of, I don't know, something like that. So then you start basically moving towards the other end, which is basically your 10th song is your chiller song. It's like the song that you know that when you are in chill mood, when you put that on, it's just going to make you feel absolute bliss. And it's, you know, kind of where you want to get to. So basically you are creating this arc, if you will, by choosing music. And in the middle is kind of a song that, you know, you still, I guess, like, but is sort of, you know, somewhere between super zen and rage, I guess. So
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. Should we just pause and just give everyone a little chance to have a think now? If you want to pick up your phone or your computer, go to the music app of your choice. We'll do this now and we'll start it off incrementally. So if it's Spotify, SoundCloud, whatever, there's usually a playlist function. So just find a song now. I'm going to use YouTube. And there's a song actually that Alex and I both love by Enai, a drum and bass song with DRS. In fact, while you're doing that, I'll just show you the song ready for when you come out, just quickly. Okay, so that's just an example for you to highlight what we're talking about. All right, Alex, next stage. So we've got our first rage anthem saved. Do that now. Okay. What's the next stage?
So the next stage, so we're going to song 2. So song 2 is essentially, it's another song that is kind of matches a similar kind of energy. So I guess, you know, if it was me and I was, and this was my first song, the DRS song that we just did, I'd probably go for another drum and bass song, maybe even something kind of, you know, heavy neuro funk, like sort of staying kind of similar sort of thing. But I would, you know, be bringing something, maybe just something a little bit less aggressive. So yeah, so basically, and that's essentially the idea. You're just kind of wanting to kind of have that grading of high energy down to kind of mid energy, and then to sort of to chill energy.
Yeah, thank you. So if everybody could find another song now, and if you can't find anything that's in the same genre, then, you know, just find something that works for you. So incrementally, we're going one step. So if we're thinking about 10 is and we won't go through the whole, you know, 9 to 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, whatever. We'll do a couple more, and then we'll hear more from you, Alex, about what you do, and times when you've used this with people, how they've responded. I think that'll be really useful, because we want to leave and have a go and feel a bit like we know what to expect, maybe things to look out for. That'd be really cool.
I think another really good thing that this is a good exercise for is just kind of checking in with how you relate to different songs that you're listening to, and because having that insight into, because I think that often we just kind of put on a song because often it kind of comes up on our phone or something like that, or it's accessible, or for whatever reason, without fully kind of thinking through how it's going to make us feel, what associations we might have with it, and what mood sort of it might put us in, that sort of thing. So I think having a really good understanding of how we kind of relate to different songs can really help us be intentional throughout the day with our music use.
So would you say that, if you're having like a bit of stress or whatever at work, or something's gone on, you feel maybe not on a rage anthem level, but you're a bit stressed out, would you say go for something that matches the stress, or maybe something that was a little bit calming, like as in soft sounds? What would you do in that scenario?
I guess this is I guess one of those there's times again where there's no, my answer to most questions in this space is it depends. And I guess so I guess it depends on how at the time how you're feeling. And I guess sort of if you're doing it for yourself, the best thing you can do is really check in with yourself and take it, I guess maybe even see the exercise of choosing a song for yourself as an exercise of checking in with yourself and giving yourself that time of permission to actually go, how am I actually feeling? And what can I actually do to, help myself with how I'm feeling? So, sometimes it can be about putting a song on that takes you where you want to go. But sometimes you really need something which can meet where you are at the moment. So sometimes, there's a classic kind of example of the breakup song. This song that's, really beautiful and everything at the time when you're in a relationship, represents everything beautiful about the relationship. But then when you break up, that song takes on a completely new meaning. And so, I guess sometimes listening to that song can be a really beautiful way to like get into the feeling of that relationship and to process the grief that you may be having around that relationship. If you're in a place where you can do that, it can be a really beautiful thing to do. If you're not in the place to do that, you want to not be listening to that song. You want to be choosing other songs which are going to help you get through the day. So I guess it really depends on sort of what you're trying to get out of your listening experience, and how you're, what you're really going for, I guess. And the more you do it, the more practice you get at it, the more the better you get at it, I guess. It's like a muscle, I guess. The more you use it, the more attuned you become to your own sort of music use. So
thank you so much, because sometimes we go along and we as practitioners and community professionals have to be there for others. If they're in a bad mood, we often absorb it like a sponge, and we've got to be saying to them, it's okay, take a seat, blah, 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 blah. When you've done that 15 times over an hour, and then you're coming away going, oh, I'm just taking in everybody else's energy. You also need to do self-care. So I'm telling all of you, you are good to go with the self-care. You have permission. Give yourself permission. Sit down, get a cup of tea, have an extra 5 minutes when you go to the loo to just splash water on your face if you've had a tough day. Everything else and everyone can wait, because if you burn out, you could be off work for months. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but sometimes we ignore our needs to service others, to support others, and our jobs call for us to be on the go, having lunch at our desk, and so on and so forth. If that's the case and you're in that environment, okay, that's cool, but go home and do something that gives you joy. having the song to reflect on can give us the impetus to then take a step that is drastic or mild. Okay, let's carry on then. So maybe if we shift to a scale 1 to the joyful song now, just to seal the end and the beginning of a playlist, and then we'll wrap that activity up, moving into our break in 11 minutes. Is that okay? So I'll give you an example. I'm going to be putting Happy by Pharrell Williams, or like a James Brown funk song, or like Superstitious by Stevie Wonder. That song, that's my happy, get up in the morning, I'm ready for anything kind of tune. So let's fill in the gaps in your own time when you've had a chance to think about it. Oh, James Brown, I Feel Good. That's another good one for your happy song.
Just reading Wen's comment here. I've been using the Beats app off top and looking for beats that have different vibes at different times. I like that it doesn't have lyrics or preconceived connotations attached to it. Yeah, I love that. That's a really great way of, I think, being able to access, kind of think about using music that you can perhaps focus more on the tonal qualities and the instrumental qualities, because if you don't know the music, you're less likely to have those kind of associations and stuff like that with it. For sure, I like that.
Thank you so much. When I'll be looking that up, ready to have a muck about with that. It's really good to see different apps. So we're 10 minutes away from having another cup of tea or a glass of water or a bit of fresh air. So what would you say was a really good example of a positive outcome in doing this activity? Can you tell us from the ground, in your practice, how this has landed when it's gone well? What's it done for people? Impact?
Yeah. So look, I think for this particular kind of sort of playlist activity and that kind of stuff, seen it have impact really across the board. I think this activity itself is a really great one because see people resonate with it, sort of across the board. It seems to make sense to people. It's something that's really accessible. So it's something that's been really good, just going out and, we've done this sort of thing in the community, even with people who are, coming out of the city, out of an office job, super stressed after a day of work, and, just being able to use this sort of stuff for the tram ride home or that kind of thing to really chill out. But I guess in terms of other kinds of work and the impact of this, I guess really the impact of helping people understand their relationship with music and their relationship to different songs, and really understand that they can be intentional with it. But I guess also really understanding at that base level that listening to music does impact your mood. So, sometimes when you're working with young people, even kind of having that kind of level of awareness that it really is going to be, if you are listening to certain kinds of music consistently, then that really could be impacting your mood, and to be thoughtful around that. That can, I've seen that have really, positive impacts on young people. And, this is being very, very clear that we are not telling anyone, don't listen to this music. We're never saying that to anyone. A really important thing is that we see music as representing identity. So if anyone brings any kind of music to you, they are showing you, they are presenting their identity if they are ever sharing a song or any kind of music with you. If you reject that music or reject that song, you are rejecting them, you're rejecting their identity. So that is something that we always strive to do. We never ever reject anything that anyone brings to us. That's not to say that we can't have conversations around it. So, we accept that, we celebrate that, but then we also use that as an opportunity to have conversations around, the impact of that listening to that music may have for a young person, whether or not it might be on their mood, whether or not it might be around narratives around disrespect to women, you know, any kind of narratives which you might find in the music that we might be like, okay, this maybe, you know, warrants a bit of a discussion. You know, have you thought about this sort of thing? But, you know, doing that stuff around mood and how different songs can impact mood has been, yeah, incredibly valuable for young people. You have see them coming back. Yeah, you're not saying don't listen to trap music. You're saying listen to, you know, this other song by the same artist, but, you know, think about, you know, when you're listening to that kind of stuff. Yeah. So does that answer that question?
Yeah, really interesting. It's sparking so much for me, and I am capturing it as best I can on the chat here, so that when we finish, it'll go, the chat will be saved with your permission. And if you want to let me know if you want any bits deleted that you've contributed, that's fine. I can delete that if you just tell me. I'm going to save the chat in the toolkit. So if you have a look at the toolkit, I'll just share the link once again in case anybody's arrived after I did that. So this is the itinerary. You will see at the bottom, it says webinar Zoom chat. After we all log out, at the bottom, you'll see all the links, all the practice tips. So just to recap Alex's point, if the music is challenging and contains difficult themes, like you might be working in probation, like I know some of you are, over at the Shore Trust, a probation charity, helping offenders in recovery. If the music comes up that, you know, refers to violence or whatever, you can use it as a starting point to ask questions. So don't just say, oh, we can't have that in here, it's to do with violence, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Just say, you know, how do you find this song? What might be challenging for others? How do you find it? And just open up a debate, dialogue, or whatever, but make sure that you're respecting where they're coming from. So it's 25. Yeah.
Add one thing on that really quickly. Sometimes it is very important to think about the spaces that the music's being brought into. Sometimes music that people bring to a space may not be appropriate for the other people in that space. So in those instances, what's really useful is being able to just say, hey, you know, really want to listen to this song with you. May not be appropriate for this particular space, but I really want to listen to it with you. So can we listen to it together after the session? Just one-on-one, and because I'd love to hear more about it with you, or something like that. So again, it's not rejecting it, it's being clear that it's not appropriate in the space, but it's not rejecting it outright, and still being clear that, you know, you want to engage with it.
That's a really good tip. I had kids come in, and on one of my, you know, I worked as a teacher for 20 years. I had people say, oh, can we play so-and-so? And I'd have to say, we can listen to that in our own time, but because we're in school, you're talking about drugs, this, that, and the other. The video is like not appropriate. Can you imagine if Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so walked in from senior staff, and then there's me playing this video with you? How would it look to them? Yeah, some of them would laugh and then just get it. And then I'd say, yeah, just listen to it at break time when nobody's about in earshot. Thanks. So we're just 3 minutes away from a break now, and what we'll do after the break is to decompress. We'll have an opportunity for you to ask direct questions to Alex. This is a rare opportunity to speak to somebody who's, you know, so closely tied to therapeutic hip hop, and, you know, is globally respected as a researcher. So super excited. Woo! Any questions? Have a think while you're having your brew. And before we go, I just wanted to speak one more time to Alex and just say, you know, thank you for your time. You're already doing some great work. Are there any kind of websites or research articles or resources that we can use to help us grow?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of articles looking specifically at the role of or the place, I guess, of hip hop and beat making in music therapy, which I've worked on. So one of those is really looking at the history of beat making and kind of the typology of it. So that is really very explicitly linking hip hop as a tradition of Black music making, and very specifically linking it to hip hop culture. But also talking about some of the key, I guess, bits of music equipment that are used in that and how they can be used for different therapeutic purposes. So that's a sort of a breakdown of the typology of different sort of beat making equipment. There's also another article which talks about improvisation techniques. If you're working in groups with young people and you want to use music technology, improvisation, there's some explanation on how to use stuff there. I can provide some links and stuff to those. I do want to do a shameless self-plug. I've just put a link in the chat. It's to a book that was just published last year. So the book is Colonialism and Music Therapy. So as part of this kind of process, I guess, you know, I guess the elephant in the room that we sort of haven't talked about is the idea of white supremacy and the idea that a lot of what I was witnessing in music therapy and the lack of representation of different music cultures and different, I guess, well, I guess if we're talking about the global majority, there was a lack of representation of the global majority in this music therapy space. All of the practice, all of the theory, all of the teaching, all of the research, you know, everything was very white, was coming from a very Eurocentric lens. And I was aware that music therapy as a practice was getting taken into places like India as well as China. And I was thinking about, you know, what form of music therapy was getting taken into these places and thinking that, you know, these are places which have very long histories and traditions of music and healing. So what are the implications of that? So that led me down a bit of a rabbit hole, which led to this book, which is an exploration of the concept of colonialism in music therapy and looking at how music therapy as a discipline is essentially has developed in the context of white supremacy and colonialism, and while it has had to do so to, I guess, prove itself within the Western healthcare context, it has also, you know, I guess, taken on some of it's sort of become a colonial agent in many ways as well, in terms of, you know, I guess, putting boundaries around who is allowed to officially participate in the music and health space. And that is a real double-edged sword, because the all of the associations and all of the you know, getting a degree and becoming registered, all that kind of stuff is really good because it gives us quality assurance in terms of the care that is being provided. However, it does close a lot of doors in terms of who is allowed to participate in that space, including anyone who's coming at it from a non-white Eurocentric perspective. So yes, plug for that book. It's
100%. Yeah, that's what we want. We want to find out where we can read more about these subjects. So, you know, this is really pertinent, music therapy and colonialism, because we have in the UK a prison pipeline from schools where kids who are excluded for behaviour or poor, but you know, poor response and so on, lack of engagement, they can end up on a pipeline to prison, and there's all sorts of complications. But prisons in the UK, mental health secure units, are more populated by global majority people, Black and Asian people. So it's important to think about colonialism in these spaces. And we're just going to decompress. So I'm going to, first of all, just ask, has anybody got any questions or any feedback? If you want to talk a bit more about the creative activity, you can. The floor is open. And if you'd prefer to write your question in the meeting chat, that's absolutely fine.
Hi, can I just jump in?
100%, Rob. Rob's from our youth panel. So big up to Rob, big up to India from our youth panel.
Love.
Also, Rob, thanks for that that song. Love it.
Yeah, man, absolutely, absolutely. Definitely comes from a place of heart. I see you, Rich, so I won't be long. I'll be pretty quick. My question for you, Alex, is you said a lot about how you believe that basically when you ask someone to share their #1 rage song, sometimes when it's challenging from like perspectives of verbal aspect, you know, it might be, you know, words, slur words, whatever they be using and stuff. You say, okay, maybe it's not the right moment to listen to this now, whatever, maybe you can listen to it on your own, which is exactly that where I want to zoom in on. Wouldn't you say, or like, what would you say more? Isn't it better to challenge that in the sense of, okay, but we're going to do it my way. If you want to listen to that, let's do it my way, in the sense of you meet them halfway. It's a 50-50 thing, right? You give them responsibility and you're also giving them the power of, duty, whatever. And as the song progresses and you find terms that are, derogatory terms, wouldn't you say it would be better to challenge them and say, okay, so why do you think he's using that? Do you think it's appropriate? What else can you do with that? Because in hip hop, knowledge is an essential element. So yeah, I just wanted to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Absolutely, I completely agree with you. I think that that's one of the real beauties of hip hop music, is that it does provide access to all these sort of things. So essentially, yes, I would absolutely do that. So what I would usually do, just to be clear, so what I would usually recommend someone would do, instead of just saying go and listen to that yourself, what I would say is I really want to listen to that with you. If it's not appropriate for this setting, let's listen to it one-on-one together afterwards. So then I would go and listen to it with them. And then definitely that's exactly what I would be recommending that people would do, is when things come up, saying hey, what I would do personally, and what I've seen done before, and what I've done before, which works really well, is actually really, when people are sharing songs and doing song sharing and listening activities and stuff like that, especially when it's in a group, usually I would let the song play through first, as a way of kind of showing I guess respect, and kind of showing full interest and all that kind of stuff, and giving it the respect that I would give any other song that I would be listening to. And then as I'm listening to it, I would, at the end of it, I probably wouldn't jump in straight away with the, what about this bad thing? And, there's this in it and that kind of stuff. I'd probably say hey, I really love the beat, or that bass line was sick, or it's got a really fire rapping, kind of the cadence was amazing on this bar or whatever. So I would really kind of celebrate it, I guess, to begin with. And then from that space, then I would kind of say hey, but, I also noticed a couple of other things in there as well. And I was wondering if we could talk about them. And, just that's probably the approach that I would sort of take. But yeah, absolutely. Very, very valuable thing to be doing while you're in that song sharing process. Yeah.
Love that. Thank you, mate. That sounds good.
Thank you. I also want to just quickly add something in that when we're working with people, we're facilitating a session, we are not we're not in the right or wrong, and the people that we're working with aren't in the right and wrong. So we must, in a therapeutic sense, be careful not to impose a value judgment over something good or bad or whatever. Just something to consider.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay, do we have a hand up? Rich?
Oh yeah, hi. Thank you so much, Alex. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to you and your story and the work and thinking about the work that you do. I have a question about it, but I guess it's at a sort of professional development level. And we've heard a lot about your thoughts about music therapy, about practice, who makes it, who it's for, why do it, all of that. I wonder if you had any thoughts about supervision and what your relationship is to supervision as in the music therapist space, and what does supervision even look like in this context? Is it traditional sort of thing, or is it more of a peer-based support thing, or is your thinking? Tell me a bit about your thinking in relation to that, if you can. Yeah.
Okay. Really good question. So just to be clear, are we talking about supervision in terms of practice supervision? So, or are we talking about academic supervision?
No, I'm talking about sort of clinical therapeutic practice supervision. Yes.
Okay, so so I guess this is I'm not a registered music therapist myself. So I essentially, it's a good question in that I've never had it myself because I'm not a registered music therapist. So it's something that I guess is it is available, and it is something that is that, yes, it's something that I've seen happen more in educational spaces, but I'm sure it happens in professional, sort of spaces as well. It's actually something I don't hear a lot about. And now that you've kind of talked about it, yeah, I'd be interested to kind of know a little bit more about it. But generally, in terms of supervision, what I tell anyone who's doing any kind of work, which is around therapy or, even sort of community work or anything like that, is that they definitely need to have their own support network. And they need to have someone that they can go to decompress and to talk about all the issues that they are coming up against. But also really important to have someone to be able to unpack the things that are coming up for you. So, as a practitioner, we are all people ourselves. We have all our own, identities and all our own life experiences. Many of us have our own traumas, all this sort of stuff. So we get triggered in all our own ways. We're not, these flawless kind of, human beings. So it's really useful to have someone to go to and unpack all the stuff that come up for us within sessions and stuff like that as well. So whether or not you do that sort of formally or not, I think that everyone should have a therapist if you can afford one, basically. That's my advice to everyone across the board, no matter what you're doing in life. So I guess that's not a very clear answer, except to say that I think it's a very important thing to have and a very important thing to do. And I do supervise people, but probably more from a mentorship role. And so I have people that I do check in with regularly, and, around their practice. But, the way that I do that is, I guess, more of a holistic sort of thing. I check in around their practice, but also check in around, how they're doing more generally in their life, as well as, other things that are happening in their life and all that kind of stuff. Stuff that's personal to them and I won't go into. But, so I think, having something, I guess that's the other thing, that any kind of supervision needs to be holistic. Like, you can't just go, only thinking about just what's happening in a session. You need to be thinking about that, how that's relating to what else is going on in your life and that kind of stuff as well. So yeah, I guess that would be my 2 cents around that.
Thank you so much. I have had supervision, and I will say that if you're working with people in a therapeutic sense, it's not something that you should bypass. If you can afford it, that's amazing. What I do is I build it into my program. So when I'm working, say, with offenders, part of my budgetary analysis and breakdown to my service providers would be X amount of sessions, this much money for resources, and supervision is charged to the person who's employing me for my service. Because for me to be a blank canvas, able to be fully present and support people, I need to have support for me. People can go into counselling positions and have lots of, upsetting stories. So it's a way of you coming out of that and having somebody there, being there for you. And if you've done something, you weren't sure if you said it in the right way, or you want to try something new, you want to run it past someone, they can help you to reflect on what might work, what might need to be adapted, and, give you advice for training and so on. So it's like a coach, somebody for professional development, somebody to unpack, and like a counsellor for a counsellor. Okay, we're going to wrap this section up and move into checkout now. So Alex, I'm sorry, you look like you were going to say something then, but just thinking about giving everyone a chance to finish off. So if you tell us in brief what it is, everybody else, I'd like you to think about one thing that you can share in, say, 20 seconds that you've taken from today. So we'll go around and check out like we did when we started, but we'll be saying, instead of a musical instrument that represents us, just one golden tip from today that you can take away, something that sparked an idea in your head or just something you enjoyed. Okay, Alex, what was it you were going to say?
I was just going to say, I love that idea of building into the budget. And it's something that I do in research as well, is any kind of therapy or anything that's happening in a research project, build in supervision for that research, for the therapist who's working on the project, but also for the researchers as well. You know, because sometimes you can come across stuff in interviews. So that support for anyone who's working in these spaces in any capacity, I think, is really important. So yeah.
Yeah, and also funding applications. Make sure you put it in your funding applications. Right then, I'm going to go to a group view. So I will change to gallery. If you are able, it'd be great if you could put your camera, and we're going to start off with Rich, then me, and then Sean, as we're in that order. So one thing that you could take away for practice, please, to wrap up. Just 20 seconds.
If you go out there and the thing that you want to do isn't there, you can make it yourself. You don't need to wait for permission, just go and make it.
Thank you, Rich. So my thing to take away for today would be that you can ask people to listen to a song with them outside of the session. I've always said that, well, I haven't tried that about, you know, giving people space outside of the session. Sean, and then Alex.
Mine is to talk to them about what they like about the song, or what inspires them, or what motivates them, what creates those emotions.
Thank you so much. All very short and sweet. Thanks, guys. So Alex and Stacey, then India.
So what did I take out of the session today? I want to just give a shout out to that Jungle Brothers song. I was still in my head. So thanks, Rob, for sharing that. I just want to bless up for that.
Great stuff. Stacey, India, then Misha.
Yeah, I'm going to take away about the ISA principle, learning about that. Really interesting. So that's something that I'll take forward with me.
Thank you so much. India, Misha, then Miles.
Hello. I suppose just having conversations with people about, so that sort of Top Rage song. I often speak with my partner about this because it's really different songs that make us sort of sad. We're the like complete opposites. And yeah, I think having those conversations with people, like, well, I always want to run around and sort of survey all my neighbours, but I probably won't do that tonight.
Thanks so much. Misha, Miles, and Rob.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm feeling a bit frustrated because I'd really like to now have conversations and hear what everyone's up to. I feel loads of ideas have been sparked and now we have to all go. So that's what I'm taking away, that I feel like that'd be nice to have a follow-up. I do find the making the playlist though, that was really good, and I'm definitely going to take that into my work because I think that's a really good tool. And yeah, if you ever have a chance to set up a conversation part of this, that'd be great.
Yeah, unfortunately, we just don't have time to spend as much time chatting. We've got a lot of people coming, so we go around to open with a check-in, check out, have a few questions in the middle, but it'd be great to talk more to people. So sorry about that. But I've just put the next month's ticket link in for March the 13th. We'll have an expert from the USA, Dr. Ian Levy. He's written loads of articles. He's a school counsellor. He does hip hop therapy and he's an absolute legend. He's written a book on the subject. So March the 13th, same time, same place. Link is in the chat. So Miles and Robert, then Kat.
I'm happy to go. I'm here.
Knock yourself out. Thank you.
It's more about the rumination. So before staff briefings, I've often played music and just been mellow. It's either been like Harry Potter, a few other things, but I'm now more conscious of the fact of what I play.
Thank you so much. Miles, are you ready? You can always put it in the chat if there's a issue with the sound. Oh, your mic's not working. No worries. Let's see what it is in the chat. Was there anybody else? Rob, did you go yet?
No,
If you'd like to go.
short and sweet. It's the sharing aspect that matters first of all. It's not necessarily the fact that you're sharing music or which idea or memory it is. It's the fact that you're sharing something with a human being and you make a connection that makes that moment special. So yeah, use that to your advantage.
Really deep. Thank you so much. Humans, when we connect, we create an energy between us, and just seeing somebody, listening to them, hearing them, witnessing them, being there for them, relating to them, that in itself creates a buzz and an energy and a vibe. Music is a tool in that. So Miles, if you can type in, that'd be amazing. Or don't worry if it's a oh, you've got it. Taking the ISO principle, very intuitive, and always ask myself if it's better to listen to something that matches the mood or changes it. Going on the journey makes a lot of sense. Yeah, really interesting. So we've got 5 minutes left. This is now we've checked out. We can open up the space again. Misha, if you wanted to, open up any questions or discussion points that you wanted to raise. At this point in the session, it is really, really important to flag up that we are going to keep it light touch. If we enter into anything deep, potentially triggering, or something that might be challenging to hear, then it can create something that might not be able to be closed within the time. So it will be like a light touch. Okay, Misha, you've got your hand on.
Yeah. For me, it's just about lyric writing and songwriting. In my work, there's a lot of people coming through with who really love drill, and a lot of those lyrics are really challenging, and how it's really just how complicated it is to meet those lyrics, validate that person and their creativity, but also challenge their content, because of obviously a lot of it is actually really, quite dangerous content, and I think that's for us it's definitely an ongoing conversation that we come back to again and again in music works where I work, and there seems to be a slow turnaround, but there's a lot of kind of resistance. So it's about meeting the resistance, carrying on working anyway, but where do you draw those boundaries? That was just something that came up when you're making, not just listening.
I'm just going to quickly respond to that, and then I'll pass over to you, Alex. So one of the things that practitioners that I've worked with do, and that I do, is to allow the music to come out, allow the music to be played and made. And then once it's out there, you can question it and respond to it and say things like, oh, the song says about doing this, this, and this. I just wondered, is that what you do? Have you got experience of that? Does that match your day-to-day life? Is that part of your reality? And how do you deal with that? And blah 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 blah. So they can say yes or no. They could say it's imaginary. I haven't got, so and so, this, that, and the other. And then you can say, maybe you could tell us about a day in your life. What's it like? What do you really do? Or what are the things that you actually spend your time on? And then you can start getting into, well, who are you? And then, yeah, I'll leave it there. Alex, is there anything that you wanted to add? We've got a couple of minutes, so we'll probably just round up after a minute or so.
So I'm going to refer again to the work of friend and colleague over in Western Australia in Perth. Guy, his name's Scott Griffiths, but his MC name is Optimus. He's part of a crew called Downside in Perth. If you ever want to check their music out, it's awesome. But some of the work that he does is in prisons, works with a lot of young men, young offenders who are their young adult offenders, and does a lot of rap writing workshops with them. And one of the things that he talks about is that often when they start out, a lot of the stuff that they're writing is how to say this, quite antisocial kind of content. One of the things that he kind of does is he'll kind of let them do this for a while. He'll kind of, he'll do a few sessions and, a few workshops and kind of let them sort of get most of this stuff out. And then it's kind of like what he said he's found is that once they sort of get it out a little bit, then he might take the time to sit down with them and say, like, that's cool, like, if you were going to write something that your mum was going to hear, would this be it? Or would you write something different? And then, get them thinking about that and like, okay, so what would it be if you were, and it's actually like, some of the stuff he's gotten out of that has been incredible. He's gotten all these beautiful love, love letters to people's mothers and all this sort of stuff. So it can be, but sometimes I think the idea again is that like, there's almost a need to let people kind of express themselves and get that out. There's often there's a reason why they're doing that. It's obviously meeting some kind of need or something like that, allowing them the space to do that and express themselves in that way in a container and offer a container for them to do that. But then in that same container, offering them the opportunity to, take a different approach, a different perspective, can be a really powerful way to do it.
Thank you so much. So it's 9 o'clock. So one of the ways that you contain complex ideas is by boundarying. So creating a line that people don't cross. So for example, it's 9 o'clock. I'm going to say, thank you so much for attending. And I hope you can make the March the 13th event. We'll be looking at therapeutic work around schools with Dr. Ian P. Levy. So please feel free to head off if you want to ask any questions. I'm going to just save the chat now. And while I'm doing that, you could stay on and I can give another couple of minutes.